Hello and welcome to Future Leaders Revealed. I'm Inga. With me is Vaios, my co-host, and joining us today is Julius de Gruyter, investor at 𝘋𝘶𝗃 Ventures, where he backs Europe's boldest early-stage startups, a Gen Z trailblazer himself, if I may say so, Julius, a co-founder of 𝘋𝘦𝘤 Germany's top mental health helpline, right out of high school, earning Social Entrepreneur of the Year honors. I did not know that. He's also co-author of the Spiegel Bestseller 𝘎𝘦𝘯 for Decision Makers, sharing insights on bridging generational gaps in business and leadership. Julius, very warm welcome. This is what 𝗿𝗏𝑥ity had to say about you. This is what we're using to, do the introduction for our guests. And obviously, I will hand over to you to say hello and to introduce yourself, and to add maybe some fun stuff to it.
Yeah, thank you, Inga. I gotta say, AI is getting better and better, right? I think a few years ago you would have got some, not the best answer out of this, and that was very accurate. I almost have nothing to add, maybe except for the fact that I'm proud Berlin, born and raised, also back in Berlin now after my studies. Love this city and everything the city has to offer, also with regards to startups and tech. So that was also kind of shaping my journey so far. And yeah, super excited to be on the podcast, and thanks for the invite.
Well, it's lovely to have you on the show, Julius. Today's episode is slightly different to the ones before, where we talked a lot with Gen Z, and now we're trying to reflect on the things that we collected from Gen Z. And we want to use your background. Obviously, you wrote a whole book about Gen Z. And just, Julius, for reference for our listeners, you are Gen Z, millennial.
I'm Gen Z. So I was born in 2001. Part of the generation myself.
Fantastic. So you're going to share some context with us on that generation from obviously your own experience, but you're representing the group of people also as we are speaking about this. I like to call cohort, not generation necessarily, because probably that's a better way to put it. Vaios?
Hello. Good morning, Julius. Fantastic to have you with us on the show. So a very warm welcome from my side. And I know we are super excited with Inga that you have decided to join us on Young Blossom25. So as Inga said, today we want to reflect a little bit on the learnings we had so far. And the first thing that I always ask in the podcast is, what's your view on this generation called Gen Z? And what do you think the reasons are behind the generational gap that we experience in workplace, in life, in all settings?
Yeah, a great question. And I would start with probably the thought that probably there was generational gaps between every generation so far, and that maybe now we're seeing it a bit more accelerated, just because, and that's my reasoning behind it. It's accelerated in Generation Z because technology has accelerated so much between like the last generations, right? So if there's more change in the way that humans interact with each other, the way that humans communicate with each other, and all of that has changed fundamentally within the last 20, 25 years. And this has a big effect on kind of generations that are coming out of it, right? So my generation, we grew up with, I was 6 or 5 when the iPhone came out, right? So yes, I remember a time where we still had Nokia phones, but not really, right? We are the digital natives. We're the first true digital native generation. And I think that's kind of the explanation behind the biggest generational gap compared to the generations before, because our means of communication and the way that we talk, the way that we communicate to each other is just fundamentally different from generations before. And one thing I would like to add though is that, and highlight as well, there was differences before as well. And if you look, for example, there's like this very funny image, and you can Google it, of like New York Times articles over the last 150 years. And I think in 1896, in 1920, in 1945, in 1970, and in 2007, there was articles highlighting that the young generation does not want to work, it's so lazy, and is not being able to fit into the current, work environment. And I think this also always needs to be highlighted. Yes, there's always issues with new generations coming into also the workforce. And there's always going to be complaints from the older generation that they do things differently than the generation before. But I also think that that's just totally normal. So that's kind of my thought around it. Obviously, it was a big question that you asked. I could talk 10 minutes about it, but I'll keep it at that, and then we can dive deeper during the episode.
One thing that for me it's always important, and of course, as you say, we hear all the things. Some people experience it, some less. I do run a team of Gen Zers at my current company right now. But what I always find fascinating with them is the fact that it seems to me, at least, that they're extremely purposeful. So they do everything with a purpose. They have a wider vision in their mind. They want to do things that at their age, when I think like 10, 15, 20, maybe more years back, I didn't think that way. So how do you reflect on this?
Yeah. I would agree. I would see it a bit more differentiated than a few years ago. I think in the book when we launched it, I think 4 or 5 years ago, that was one of the main topics as well of the book. And I would say in general, yet a lot of people from my generation are looking for a purpose when trying to do their work, and they don't accept just being subordinates for a few years just for the sake of it. And they very much question the status quo. And if they come into kind of a job, they want to kind of, find their purpose rather than just carry out work. I think one reason behind this is probably social media, in my opinion, because you have the possibility to dream big, since you can follow everyday people's life every day and see that. And there's this famous saying on like this meme on social media right now, like you can just do things, right? And people motivating you to just do fun stuff and that show you a life that is maybe more colorful or more fun or whatever than sitting in a job that you don't enjoy. And if you have all of this perspective in your feed every day and you see people opening a surf camp in Brazil and you see other people working in an office job, but having a lot of flexibility by about, I don't know, working from home or owning their team when they're already very young, or they're doing something not just because they want to earn money, but because they want to be the, I don't know, best marketer in the world in 5 years. This gives you probably a lot of motivation, but it also gives you a bit of self-entitlement, right? And I think that's one part of the story. What would be interesting to watch, in my opinion, is how this develops over the past years, because Gen Z 3-4 years ago, when they entered the workforce, they had a very, very, I think, friendly job market to go into. And you could basically do requests. You didn't have to upload your CV. You could ask for higher salaries. You could ask for higher positions. And the people in executive kind of rooms accepted that because they needed great talent, right? And I think with AI, with, at least the German or kind of European economy still in crisis over the past years, I think we're seeing a very big shift in dynamics in the job market. And I see friends of mine that are highly educated, did great master degrees, struggling to find jobs right away after graduation. And I would put up the hypothesis that maybe in 1 or 2 years, if these people try to enter the workforce and they just struggle to find amazing jobs, that they will maybe not put the biggest focus on purpose, but rather on kind of finding a job. So it would be interesting to see how this kind of develops. I think what is here to stay is the kind of a general purpose that you need behind the job, just because you have so much perspective on what's possible. But I would also say that this was very driven by job market dynamics and would be interesting to watch how this develops.
I think it's ready to jump into the discussion. So before you do that, Inga, just a small note, because I'm very interested to understand a little bit more about your book before Inga takes over. So can you share a little bit more details around it?
Yeah. Of course, I don't have it here. If not, I could show it in the camera. But it's called Gen Z for the Decision Makers. I think it's only available in German, actually, maybe also in English. Not 100% sure, but we published it almost 4 years ago already. And the goal behind the book was to bring together decision makers across generations in Germany to basically explain this generation to other decision makers, right? Because what you just described, like leading Gen Z teams, having to work with them, having to deal with their quirks and the way that they act, was a big challenge, I think, for a lot of decision makers and companies, especially when they just entered the workforce. And we wanted to try an explanation and basically give a guidance on how to deal with them, how to understand them, how to make sure that you actually attract the best talent to your company. And we were a group of, I think it was 6 or 5 basically publishers who published this book. And we brought together a group of 30 other authors that wrote like short case studies about this. And they range from how to market to Gen Z up until like, why does Gen Z care about purpose, or how to hire Gen Z into your company. And there were a few cool authors in the book as well. For example, 𝗔𝗱𝘃𝘬𝘃, who's now the Minister of Economic Affairs in Germany. Back then, she was still, in the, I think, an executive at 𝗏 at a big energy company in Germany. She also wrote a case study. So really got like a cool group of authors together. And I think we have a cool book that is rather like a big guidance with case studies rather than like a concrete description on how to deal with them. Was really great writing this book or co-authoring this book with all of these authors. I would say maybe one reflection on the book like 5 5 years later, 4 years later. I think, I'm super happy that we kind of published this. I think nowadays I have a bit more of a differentiated view on Gen Z, because I feel like now we have kind of two versions of Gen Z, the pre-COVID version and the post-COVID version in some way, right? Because my brother, for example, he finished high school during COVID. I finished high school before COVID. And back then I very generalized Gen Z on a few topics, like Gen Z is Fridays for Future, Gen Z is this, Gen Z is that. And I think what has stayed the same is that Gen Z across kind of the whole generation, they are digital native, they communicate via social media, and they look for some kind of purpose in the things that we do. I think what is different is that saying that Gen Z is one thing specifically, because it's just so diverse, because of the diverse backgrounds that we had. Some people finished high school during COVID, some people did before, some people got to travel the world, some people didn't. So for me, Gen Z is not only, generation Fridays for Future, as you would have described it 6 years ago, but, now you see a lot of Gen Z conservative people in the US, for example. So it's like everyone is political, everyone communicates through social media, but the, opinions are vastly different. And the same is also true for the personal background.
Great. Thank you so much.
That's a great segue. So I kind of browsed through the book. Indeed, it's only in German. So Vaios, if you want to, practice your German a bit more, I highly recommend it. And what was the impact of the book? Did you guys did you guys get a lot of feedback? Because it was a bestseller, right? Like it qualified for the bestseller Spiegel list, at least. What was the feedback and the positive, the negatives, if there were any negatives?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the feedback was overwhelmingly positive from what I've heard directly or what I was being texted. And I think everybody was just like, more like, read this book, right? I mean, it was always clear that this is not going to win, Nobel Prize for literature, right? It was never like the masterpiece and the epitome of modern, author and book writing. But I think the general kind of tone was generally we have some people that you can actually take serious, that are putting their thoughts that they posted on LinkedIn before or in their Instagram story into a book that I can buy and that I can give to my boss and basically finally tell him on how to work with Gen Z. I know that also some companies actually bought the book and gave it to all of their kind of leadership team, which was super cool to see. Like, I think there was a big consultancy who was like, hey, everybody in our team needs to read this, and he bought it them as a Christmas present. I think that was super cool, just so they kind of get the spirit of Gen Z. So I think that was also great. There was also negative feedback. I think it's always the bit of the, downside of these books with kind of 30 people writing their kind of own small articles. Everybody wants to put as much as possible in a few pages. And, sometimes it then sounds like a collection of, LinkedIn articles and whatever. I guess they have a point there, but I think overall positive feedback. And yeah, one negative feedback was also how much of this is like truly new. And then I always answered like, we did not do research on Gen Z. We didn't team up with a university and try to kind of do like a long-term study on how they behave. Our goal was with very clear real-life examples to show how to work with them. And if you already know that before, then probably you don't have to read the book. If you don't know that before, then the book. I think that was kind of the main points around the book.
I think what I kind of noticed is there was some form of, whether it is a recommendation, food for thought. Hey, if you're running an HR organization, hey, if you're running marketing organization, here is how you potentially want to think about your employees, your target group, and that group of employees will become the majority of the employees. A bigger piece of the cake will be taken by that generation, right? So you want to start thinking about some processes, especially when it comes to, how that generation likes to receive feedback, how often, and where companies find themselves in a more structured environment, especially big corporations, right? Like we get feedback twice a year. So this is a process, and that's maybe okay, but how leaders have to adapt and managers have to adapt to that group of people that do require instant on the spot, not only gratification, but hey, that went well. Hey, that was not great. Like, don't collect it until you're in the mid-year reviews and then you dump it all on me so that I have the chance actually to work on it. And I think if I say your generation is a lot more demanding when it comes to that versus my generation, like I was more okay because I was more used to it and that's how it was. That's fine. The one topic that I wanted to touch base a little bit more is what you said on on the purpose and your slightly differentiated view now, there was a time where the job market was extremely favorable. And when the job market is extremely favorable, I guess all generations can demand more because it's employee favorable. So I am having the leverage. Now the leverage goes away. And when we met before the podcast to introduce ourselves to each other, you mentioned something similar for the US. So in the US, where education is expensive and people come out of university with high debt, what they do is no matter what generation you are, you get a job, you keep your head down because you need to pay the debt. And in a slightly different variation of that, we're facing now in Europe, especially probably in Western Europe, where, the last 3 years were becoming tougher and tougher, probably in the job market. We see a bit of a shift where people may be less willing to jump and look for a little bit more stable, secure environment is a big statement. What I wanted to head is, how does, and I say again, your generation for a very specific purpose, do financial planning? Like, how do you guys plan for wealth building, future? How do you plan your investment? And I say again, my generation, you bought a house, like property was a big topic. Everybody had to own something that was so important, which is also a bit culturally, I think. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the
Yeah,
financial?
of course. I think a huge topic for our generation. I mean, I'm of course saying this as a business student who's working in finance now. So obviously I'm probably thinking about this a lot more than other people. And I would say, yet again, this is an answer probably more for my cohort of people rather than for the whole generation. But I would say, I mean, the reality is, and we have to face this, and I don't know if my whole generation sees it in that clarity, but we cannot rely on any pension that we're going to be paid off by the state just because of the demographic change. So we pay in a lot of money every month into the kind of, into the pension system, but it's unclear on how they want to pay out that money to us in 40 years. It's just unclear, and they don't have a solution so far. So I think the answer to this has to be, okay, unfortunately, they have to give away that kind of money every month. I would have liked to invest it in myself more, but we have to just invest ourselves and make sure that we have enough money when we retire. So first point. And the second point is, for a lot of people, the house, the property, what they bought, what they owned was basically their pension security, right? So they lived in the house, and when they were too old, they were able to sell off the house and move to an elderly home and live the rest of our life there. And the same reality is, I live in Berlin, I grew up here. And if I'm not getting extremely rich, I will not be able to afford a house. I might be able to afford a nice apartment or whatever, but the likelihood that I, like my parents, can raise my children in a house with a garden is super low because it's exploded in the last 20 years. And I think the same is real for a lot of other cities. Vaios mentioned that he grew up in Munich, and I think even on the countryside, kind of real estate prices are rising. And I think in this reality, it is actually a blessing in disguise that we have also seen a democratization of capital markets towards our generation. So I think rather than saving money towards buying a house, we have the great chance of investing our money through brokers like Trade Republic or 𝗿𝗵𝘃 and just sending every money that we have left every month to that and investing it into ETFs and stocks and whatever, and basically building our private kind of insurance around it. So I think that's what a lot of people do. They know basically, okay, they don't know on that they probably cannot retire on a house or on the pension that they get from the state, and then they invest 100, 500, 1,000, whatever they can a month, and try to build up wealth through this. And I think this is on the one hand, a sad development to see kind of property prices and also kind of pension system evolving. But on the other hand, this is a great development that kind of young people are basically forced to talk about financials very early, to get financial education very early, and also kind of to build expertise on this. Because Germany was never a big country of stock owners, and the US was much more further along there. And this is probably a good development that we kind of start investing our money into public markets, that we start kind of looking at what we can do there. And I think that's a great development. I probably would predict that Gen Z is a lot more financially literate than a lot of generations before, just because it's a lot harder basically to find your way into financial security there. So that's kind of my thought around all of that.
And is it addressed as part of the general education Is that addressed enough in the educational system?
Say no. But then again, with all of these topics, like every few years you have the debate, why don't we learn on how to file taxes in school, but we learn on how to do a poem analysis in 4 languages. And that's always what they say. And then they say we should learn on how to do our tax filing in school. And me personally, I actually have the opinion, no, we shouldn't. Like, it's why should we do this in high school? I think it's actually good that we learn new languages, that we are curious, that we learn a very broad scope of things in high school. Do we have to do the poem analysis in 4 languages? Maybe not, but I think it's actually good that high school is a place on get like general education. And I think the rest, there's probably other ways to educate people on this. And I would say, no, it's not addressed in general education, but it's widely available on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok, on social media. I think the danger here is a bit on finding the right sources, right? So I, as a person working in finance, having gone to business school, can probably identify quite well what kind of a serious, good, sensible kind of business account is. They can give me good tips on financial education, while somebody who does not have that background might not be able to do that. So I think maybe we should highlight the really good creators here and help people find their way. But I actually think that, the offers on YouTube, at least the German language ones, are actually pretty good and take you pretty far.
Very nice. I think that is, in general, learning happens in a very, very different way. And as Vaios and I, when we kicked it off, we also had the notion of how does the learning institution need to adapt? And then the question really is, do they need to adapt? So that is where we are. And it has the notion of what you said. There is some general education that is important. And as much as, oh God, I did not like history at school, but I wish I had paid more attention back then. It would help, because context is being created by understanding history. And if you don't understand the basics and the evolution of the things, how did we get there? How did we get here? What happened there? It's very hard to formulate an educated opinion. And I think that what school and university does and business school does to a great extent, that you learn some evolution, you learn to contextualize information, and you learn to think structurally and to put things into perspective as well.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree 100%. I think the context one is super important, and I'd rather have students, young people that have context on why is Germany the way it is, why is Europe the way it is, and all of that, and kind of go throughout their days with this knowledge in mind. And of course, AI will diminish the need of knowing facts about everything, right? I mean, that was also the case with the internet. Do I really need to know the exact date of something that happened? Probably not. Would it be good to know the decade and the historical context of what event happened? Probably yes, because it helps you understand kind of the history or the broader context of the country. And this is what AI cannot do yet. I mean, there's a lot of teams working on this kind of context layer, but I think this will still take some time until it's fully developed. And until then, I'd rather have people kind of learning this context in school. And what I don't mean by this is like clinging towards, bringing up the example again, the poem from the 15th century or the 19th century or whatever, and analyzing this 20 times, but rather helping students understand what the world we live in is looking like and why it looks the way it looks like. And I think then the rest can be explained much more easily and can be taught much more easily. And that's kind of my stance on this.
Great. Just to close it out, your perspective, I started financially educating my 12-year-old daughter. Well, I should say my husband, and he watches all those YouTube videos because even I'm not sure how much pension we're going to get. So we are absolutely, aside from property, but also investing into the stock exchange and as well as crypto, worth saying. And our daughter, who overheard the conversation over Christmas dinner, said she wants to invest as well. And we took that curiosity up. She's 12 years old. She did not know what she did not know. And we kind of started explaining. She was still curious. So now she is willing to give away some of her pocket money so that we are investing it for her. And we are mirroring that investment 10 times. So she gave us 10 euros out of her 30 euros pocket money per month. And we are making it 10 times. So we're adding 100. So every month she's investing 110. And we have an tech ETF that we bought for her that has some good development and is a good long-term investment. And she has a spreadsheet. Well, she didn't allow us to do a spreadsheet. It's a Google document. It needs to be in a Google Doc, where every month she can see how the fund is doing and how her money is becoming more or less. We also explained that it can become less, not only more, that there is a concept that it can become less. What's your thinking on how early is early? Would you, if you have kids, start that education? Would you have appreciated as a 12-year-old that your parents would have said, hey, Julius, why don't you,
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I would say, I mean, I would have appreciated it probably. I mean, I had to wait until I was 18, and then I was able to open kind of my own kind of account and invest. To be fair, my parents set aside a bit of money though, and always paid it into like kind of an ETF or I don't know, birth, and then my whatever communion or all of the events that you have throughout your life. I think this is a great thing either way, but I obviously didn't do anything with it myself. I wasn't able to touch it or decide on what to do with it. So I think, yeah, I think that's probably, I think, a great idea to start in the teenage years or even before and basically give them a bit of money or let them invest the pocket money and just understand the concept. Because I think one of the biggest learnings is not to look at kind of your app every day and getting too nervous about whether it goes up or down. Yeah, and if you have a lot of money in these apps, it can be hundreds of euros, thousands of euros that you lose in a day or win in a day. And I think, getting this perspective of you're doing this for the 17-year perspective, you're doing this for the long term. And I think this cannot be taught early enough. So yeah, I think a great example, and definitely more people should do this.
Great. So I was just closing down the loop on the financial planning and investing and educating teenagers on how to use their money. One thing that was high during the last 11 episodes we rediscussed with our guests, Julius, was about this easily quitting trend that we see. We see it also in my company, in PepsiCo, where I currently work. So, and when Inga was my GM for the last years, we always discussed this, how easily people left, how easily they abandoned what we discussed, what we dreamed about, what we tried to inspire them about, etc., etc. So how do you see this in your own setting? What do you think this is driving? Is it real, or is it only, an illusion we have?
Yeah. No, I think it's probably real. And I would say this is also going to stay even if the job market turns toward a more employer-friendly environment. And why? I think people realize that a good CV is not made up by staying necessarily at the same company for 25 years, which can be great, but doesn't have to be great. And I think especially in a world where we have more startup jobs that are kind of making up more parts of the economy that are also well paying, where people care less about how much time you spend at a company, but rather what you have achieved at a company and what you have done. I think it becomes more normal to switch jobs more often. And I think this will be something that we will see continuously throughout the next generation. And look, I mean, also if you look at, I don't know, what my plans are for the future. I mean, I'm super happy in my job. It's a great learning experience. Do I think I'm probably going to do this job nonstop for the next 20, 30 years? Probably not. Do I think I'm going to do it for the next 5 years? Maybe not. Maybe I'm going to do it 1 or 2 more years. That's basically what the current kind of also the current situations. A lot of people after graduation want to do a job for 2 or 3 years and then kind of orientate again and then look around and see what other options there are. And for me, it's probably become an entrepreneur again and building my own company one day, which is maybe different to what other people's want. But even if I look at my girlfriend, is she going to stay at this company for her whole career? Probably not. And I think this is just the reality that happens more and more. And I mean, I work in startup tech industry, my girlfriend as well. So I think that's even more common to kind of switch. But even in corporate, you can spend a few years in corporate, switch to another one, probably get a salary increase by switching. And I think all of that just leads to a bit more mobility.
Well, go.
No, go ahead, Vaios. Go ahead. I'll note it down. Go ahead.
I was just wondering, what would be your advice if you would be in corporate, if you would be working in a large multinational corporation? What would you advise leadership teams of such a company on how to engage more with these people, how to retain them, how to provide like a clear path going forward that makes sense also for them?
Yeah, I think leading by example in a way of like, if you've spent a lot of time in the company and they see that you have the chance to, have a leadership position, get paid well and all of that. I think in the short term, probably nothing that appeals too much to Gen Z because they want everything now and not in 10 years. But I think, trying to understand who are the ones that might be able to stay a bit longer, talking to them on kind of what the advantages of staying longer are. And I think these are definitely there and overlooked by our generation. I see it in my industry as well as a person working in venture capital. A lot of people leave the job after 3 or 4 years. And I've heard from a few people that are staying longer, that just staying longer makes a huge difference in the way that you have. What network do you have? Do you know? What leverage do you have in the company? What context do you have in the company that nobody else has? And I think making this clear to the team and being like, guys, if you stay 5 years rather than 3, you have 10 times more context, you know this more, you can get the salary increase, you can get the speed up the position. And if they stay 5 years, it's probably more likely that they stay 10 years as well. And I think trying to highlight this a lot would make sense rather than just saying, okay, then go. And I think the other one is adapting to Gen Z and work culture and all of other things. And I have the feeling, I don't know exactly because I haven't worked in the US corporate, but that even in the same companies in the US, they do this a bit more because they have the very structured internship programs where people stay in the summer. Then everybody starts when they're 22, straight out of college. And they're basically still kids, right? In Germany, people start probably 26, 27. They did a master's degree. They went abroad. It's a very different kind of stage of life that they're at. And I think you can pick up these 22-year-olds a lot better with kind of events, with memes, with kind of pop culture in the company that they identify with the employer a lot more than they do in Germany, where probably identifying with work is happening a bit less in general because people want to work and then they want to go home. And second of all, because they're probably also on average 4 or 5 years older than they are when they start in the US. But I think borrowing from that, and I also have a friend working for Pepsi, for example, in the US, it feels like a lot more of a lifestyle of a job rather than just a job. And I feel like trying to put it more as a lifestyle could help people to stay longer.
I think it's interesting how you put it. What is the advantage of staying longer? I don't think we think this way. We focus a lot on the short term. Oh, this could be your next promotion. This could be your next move, rather than paving a bit more the path. And we put a lot of that path on the employee, expecting that they know. But again, if I think back 25 years when I started working, did I know what I wanted to be? Well, I ended up in finance. I hated it, quite frankly. But my boss said, it's good for you, just do it. It was extremely beneficial. Like, I stayed in finance for 7 years and I did not regret a single day of it, because every job I took after was so much easier, because the context that you get and the background that you get when you have worked in finance and the understanding you get of the business is fundamentally different to, had I chosen a different career. And again, career back then was finance, marketing, sales, operations. Today is, you name it. Entrepreneurship was, you were absolute exception if you went down the path of creating your own company, or going to private equity. Private equity was also not very on vogue. Maybe consultancy. Consultancy was very big, right? So I think helping paving that path and making understand that the choice that the young people are making is more conscious, rather than my next increase, my next salary, my next job, my next level, like whatever you care about at this point in time, because people care about different things. I think that's really something that every manager can take on who is managing Gen Z. It's not only for big leaders and, HR, it's for everybody who is managing people in that matter. If I can shift a little bit gears and talk just a couple of minutes about Gen Z as consumers. Talk to us a little bit about how do companies engage with the young folks in the most meaningful way to sell more, because that's what they want.
Yeah, I think the big difference is we're used to having personalized approach, a very personalized approach to what we like or what we don't like. Right? What has changed is, when I still was a child, I watched TV, linear TV, like turned on a TV and watched whatever was going on. And I saw out-of-home advertising outside, right? And that was still normal when I was small. Nowadays, I would much, much rather buy from an influencer I highly respect, or from a very niche person that understands my needs, or from a YouTube tutorial or whatever. So I would say what's gotten more and more important is becoming specialized in the way that you sell your product. And on the one hand, this is great because you can use sometimes expert language for very niche products and sell this, which before was very hard to advertise. I think the disadvantage of that is how do you introduce a niche product to a broad audience if everybody's just on their own kind of niche way? And I think that's always kind of the double-edged sword that you have to go. On the one hand, you have to find kind of the right people who convey your message. And that's why also some podcasts with much less kind of reach than the big podcasts get a lot of funding because they're business podcasts and very, decision makers listen to them. And I think the other reality is you still have to see on how can you make generalistic campaigns go viral. I think the second one is more relevant for big consumer brands like, Pepsi or Coca-Cola or whatever. And I think for the second part, there's always a social media component nowadays. And I talked about this with my roommate the other day. Out of home advertising probably only works anymore if you can recycle this in kind of social media afterwards. So just having some poster in some street in Germany just saying, yeah, buy our new product is nice, but probably doesn't have as much of an effect as like 30, 40 years ago. What you try to have to do is kind of make a flashy campaign or, I don't know, decorate the TV tower in Berlin or whatever in a way so that people will post about it and that gets recycled. And I think, first one is the social media mindset, first kind of for Gen Z as a consumer product. And the second one is kind of the double approach of at the same time trying to reach a broad audience with hyper-viral campaigns and at the same time trying to reach your specialized audiences with micro-influencers or YouTube or TikTok or whatever. And I think I'm not an advertising expert. I don't have a marketing campaign. This is not like great advice. If I'm wrong, please correct me. But kind of this would be my thoughts around this, knowing the generation a bit.
Yeah. And it's more about how you as consumer behave, right? Like this is what, you would probably also pay attention to as consumer.
I just wanted to reflect a little bit also on your experience, Julius, with working with other Gen Zers. You work in the startup, so it's a community where you engage with people of your age, having similar experience, etc., etc. How is this like? Is there anything, working with people of your age, with Gen Zers, that you would like to change? Something you would like to see different?
Yes and no. I think on the one hand, I do work a lot with my generation as well. I also work with older people. I would say most people are not Gen Z, just because I'm more towards the older end of Gen Z, and they are still like, I'm not millennials or whatever. But it's interesting. There's also already some kind of differences there, and I think the generational divide definitely makes sense in the years that they cut off. I mean, there's some little differences. Like I feel like Gen Z uses Google Meet and not Microsoft Teams or Zoom, like these little tools that just feel a bit younger or whatever. And I feel like also, so that's maybe one difference. I think in the way of working, not sure actually. I think it's quite standardized how like a investment process in a startup looks like that I do every day. And the expectations of founders is pretty similar, no matter if you're like Gen Z or older. I would say Gen Z founders always are a bit more all over the place, a bit more energetic sometimes, in the way that they pitch rather than like farm and kind of building on their experience. They are also very quick. I mean, older founders as well, don't want to kind of make that divide there, but like sometimes, you're immediately on WhatsApp with them, have discussions topic a bit quicker than with other generations. I think that's why it's sometimes more fun to work with my generation. But I think overall, I tend to learn sometimes more from the very experienced people that I work with because kind of their experience, helps me grow as a person, gives me the feedback that I need in order to get a better kind of person at my job. So I appreciate working with both, and I would say the differences aren't as big as you would imagine, maybe.
Inga, your question? Thank you.
I think that's a really good reflection, and that reflection comes predominantly from Gen Z that probably is a bit older and has a bit more working experience because they start to value certain things. And as it always happens, and again, work environment differs irrespective of generation. If you're being treated with respect and not, oh yeah, okay, you're young, you don't know, you don't understand, very dismissively, I think that doesn't help to, being open and receptive. But equally, if somebody treats me dismissively and without respect, I will also not be very open to learn, right? And equally on the receiving end, if you're dismissive of everything that might be, well, that's also not very helpful. But that is some basic social interaction that we all should kind of keep in mind, irrespectively of how old we are. I'm looking a bit at the time so that we are not overrunning too much. I think that was great perspective, Julius. Quite mature, I have to say, not to sound condescending or anything. Obviously, you wrote a book about it, so you thought about that generation a lot and how they are in the workplace, how they interact with products, how they interact with people, how they interact in general. We have one lightning round to do, which is fast and quick. And you're familiar with it. I can shoot off. Social media you spend the most of your time on?
Good question. Instagram, probably.
You get your music from?
Spotify.
AI tool you use the most?
Just ChatGPT, the newest version.
What is the one skill you would recommend Gen Z to learn?
I would say in a world where kind of knowledge sometimes unfortunately gets a bit commoditized because of AI, knowing how to sell, how to interact with people, how to build personal relationships gets more and more.
What is the one skill you would recommend to acquire for Gen X or the current leaders?
Good question. There's this the funny thing. It's not that quick of an answer, but it's called the millennial pause. If you kind of record a video, millennials always pause until the video is starting, and then they start talking. And then there's the Gen Z shake that Gen Z just starts talking the second they press on the button. I think that shows a bit of the spirit of like how quick and digital Gen Z is compared to the other generations. I would say adapting the Gen Z shake might be a good mindset for the older generation.
Nice. And last one, a famous person you would like to meet?
Barack Obama, I would like to. Yeah, Barack Obama, I would like to meet. Yeah.
Nice. Well, this is it, Julius. It was a blast having you on the show and getting your perspective. I think it was quite enriching. You debunked some myths and gave good perspective and quite mature perspective on your generation, which was very nice.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I mean, all of these topics, always excited to speak about this, and just already have 20 afterthoughts about what we talked. I could talk about this for 2 hours. So it was great fun. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being part of Young Blossom25. Please hit that follow, subscribe button, leave a comment with your thoughts, reactions, and we'll pick it up in the next episodes. Until then, see you.
See you. Bye.
Bye.